Hello, all you lovely ladies. So, if you are listening on our podcast, my podcast is Fulfilled After 50, and we are on episode 68. And we have a special guest today, is Carrie Jeffries, and Carrie is a peak performance coach. But I met Carrie probably, I guess, maybe 2 years ago now. And I met Carrie in Nashville, Tennessee. We were at a similar networking group. We work with a coach because everybody needs a coach. So, in this season of life, which it's Fulfilled After 50, if you ladies are watching on YouTube or our Facebook Live here, we sometimes struggle with our confidence in this season of life. So Carrie came on today and she's going to talk to us a little bit about our confidence, because when we are in our 50s, we actually should have the most confidence in our lives and at our peak right now, because we've been through so many experiences. But like Carrie and I were talking about before, sometimes it is that fear of, one, we feel like we're too old to start a new business. Sometimes we feel that we are too old to maybe change our healthy eating, or, whatever it is. Our confidence deals with everything in our life. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself, Carrie, and just tell them a little bit about you and how you got to this point would be great.
Well, that's a wild ride, because my life has just been so full. So we certainly don't have time for me to tell the whole thing, but we're going to tell just like this little clip or sort of this eclipse of things. So I was really an entrepreneur probably from the time I was a kid. I didn't even know it. I mean, who knew what that word was? I didn't even really know what like owning a business was like, because nobody in my family did. But I always had this, there was just something that drove me inside. I was even one of these crazy little kids making pot holders with one of those dumb little things and trying to go door to door selling it. So, and there were parts that I liked and parts that I didn't, but I have definitely not followed a traditional path. So one of the things that you had said is, and I really heard this loud and clear before we even started this, but even when you were talking, was that, is it too late? And I am here to say, and she knows I have to watch my language, but heck to the no. Like, no. One of the things that I was really blessed with was a father that, even though my father wasn't even supposed to live, he was born a little runt. And he was one of, I think, 17 children or something like that. It was crazy. And they were dirt dog poor, like with nothing. And so my father was the only one to go to college, to achieve things. And somehow there was that something that God put in him that just kept driving him. And then he instilled that in me. So one of the things he always said was, it's never too late. It's never too late. And somewhere all along throughout my life, I kept getting that same message that it's never too late. And so my fundamental attitude, opinion, belief, everything is that it's never too late until you literally take your last breath. That is the only time that it is too late. So I've watched people in their 90s who have run their first marathon, or others who were who really didn't even hit their stride till 70 and created this thriving business. So there's so many examples of how it's never ever too late. And I think there's this misnomer out there too, is that you only get like one mission. And I think that's garbage. I think the mission can change. The purpose deep down within doesn't really change. I think we were born for something, but that thing isn't a business or a job or something like that. There are so many different ways that we can bring out that purpose that we were created for. A lot of times the mission can change, the vision can change, but that purpose doesn't change. But never confuse purpose with the mission or the vision. So even though you may have had a career or maybe a number of different careers and you're thinking, what am I going to do now? There are so many different options. The challenge that I see is that even when we strip everything away, it always boils down to that fear. And the higher the performer that you may have been, sometimes you think, oh, well, the confidence is going to be a problem. But, you know, I call it the fraud factor. Other people call it the imposter syndrome. And so you end up with this imposter-itis, like where you just don't ever feel worthy or qualified or whatever. And so even though you see people with confidence, doesn't mean they don't struggle with it. I do. You know, some people have said to me, wow, you're one of the most confident people. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, sometimes if you only knew the things behind the scenes, because I am. But there are things that you can do to shore that up. It's not that we don't experience that same fear. It's just learning how to move through it quicker, maybe, or even more efficiently. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I tell my ladies, you know, like your career really leads to your retirement. And so we may have a career and that's going for our retirement, but our calling and our purpose is never retire from it. That goes till the day that we no longer have blood pumping through our veins, right? I think the challenge is that, you know, God puts a unique purpose in all of our lives, and it's how do we unveil that? How do we unwrap that? And, you know, I think part of the problem with confidence is that we have a lot of comparitis as women.
Ooh, boy, you spot on. I jotted down just a couple of little, you know, points, and that was one of the big ones that I wrote down, because it's all seemed to be rooted in fear, but it does show up in different ways. And I call it the comparison prison. That's what I have called it. And it's so true. And it happens. I mean, it happens to men too, but women seem to struggle with this one even more so. And sometimes as you go further on in life, because you're watching so many other people do so many things that you think are amazing, and you're thinking, and secretly somewhere down deep, a lot of times you're thinking, I'm not that amazing. I can't do that. But the reality is we need to stop comparing, because God doesn't compare us, and God didn't compare our callings, and God didn't create us to have competing callings, but complementary callings. So, and it really is about the calling. In fact, I don't even like the word retirement, because I plan to never retire. That doesn't maybe mean that you work forever for money or in a particular career. I probably will, but I'm just one of those insane people because I just love to work. But I got this idea. I had this idea in my head, but then I heard a guy, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, speak. And one of the so interesting things that he said was that in Hebrew, there is no word for retirement. And people, you could see these confused looks on their face, but he explained, because with your work, whatever that looks like, whether it's a job or serving things or whatever it is, you're serving God's people. And his question was, when are you done serving God's people? So it kind of goes back to that thing that I had talked about, where I learned from my father that it's never too late until you take your last breath, because you're always serving. There's always this calling. And maybe we go into a different season or a different phase and we transition into that. But it never goes away, to your point. So there is a deeper calling, and that deeper calling definitely ties into that purpose. That's why I said the mission, the vision can change, but definitely not that purpose, which ties into that calling.
Right. And just like you said, we get trapped, and then we get analysis paralysis, because we're always looking at somebody else's. We take our blinders off. And I know in the beginning, you know, I'm 55. So at 50, it's not because it was the number 50 that changed things for me. It was because my season changed for me. And my kids left, and that left me in a season that I had no idea what my life was supposed to look like now. And then I saw, you know, this person here and that person there, they were doing this and they were doing that. And I was trying to follow in their journey. And then I missed the blessings that were for me in my journey. And what did that look like for me? And I really didn't understand that, Carrie, until I started reading and looking to develop me. because nothing was going to unveil until I discovered who I was again. Because I was a person before I was a mom, right? And who was
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely. And I think that's the challenge is sometimes people start to pigeonhole themselves in one or two things and they start to see that as their identity. And it's
Yeah.
not your identity. It's something that you do. It's a part of you. And you, pardon me for a second. And you won't, and you don't want to deny that part.
Right.
But we do have these seasons and it can start to feel like a roller coaster. But I kind of look at that as the fun part. I mean, it can be very nerve-wracking, but that's the fun part. And there are lots of different changes because I had a whole different business from what I had, and it was about not quite 5 years ago or almost 5 years ago. I had another business I'd been doing for 10 years, but the sort of behind the scenes secret was I was successful and totally miserable, like completely miserable. And the more the time went on, the more I hated it. And I kind of just fell into it. Because just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean you should do it, but also just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean you're going to make a profit from it either. So there's this kind of little recipe that I had to put together for myself during this time. But the biggest secret behind it was I was really afraid to make the leap. Sometimes we allow success or where we've been or where we are comfortable to become the trap instead of being able to, even if you just take and dip your toe on the other side, I find it interesting, and this might be hard for some people to hear, but as you well know, Alice, I'm kind of a tough talker at times, but that is this: if we're going to talk about faith, we better walk about faith.
Right.
And what that means is if we're going to really talk it, then we need to be willing to step out of that boat with that first step. Like, when Jesus told, was it Peter to, not always perfect, but to step out of that boat, and then there's a book that was written and I never even read it, but the title was so amazing because you can get these little inspirations from everywhere. And I can't even remember who the name of the author was right off the top of my head, but it said this: just enough light for the step I'm on. I think the fear comes because we think we've got to know everything and we're going to have this lightning bolt moment. The lightning bolt's not coming. The lightning bolt happens and the clarity happens with each step that you take. And if we're going to talk about faith, we got to take that next step in faith. Now, I'm not talking about this gigantic leap. I don't necessarily say if somebody's doing something that they should just jump off the cliff without a parachute. That will make you even more uncomfortable. But right. I call it fearing on purpose. And one of the things with fearing on purpose is taking these small steps that are uncomfortable. And here's a second tip to that. How do you do that if you just cannot get past that first step? I call it a brave buddy. Because, it's always easier to be brave with somebody else or with a group of people. Yes. So you've got to find the right people, because some people will want to keep you. They don't mean it on purpose to keep you trapped, but they're not comfortable with moving out. And so they don't want you to move out as well. So you need to find a brave buddy that sees that promise and that blessing and that calling in you, and to be able to help you take that step out and just say, come on, girl, give me that hand. We're going. We're making that phone call. We're taking that step. We're going to that art class, whatever it is. And so that's another thing. That's a third thing, is you can start to explore different things. Call it dating yourself, because you talked about getting to know yourself. And how do you get to know yourself? How about you start dating yourself? Try some different things that feel a little uncomfortable or that maybe you never thought of. I had a coach during that time when I was working to transition to where I'm at now. And she said, okay, I want you to do something creative. And I'm like, what the, what are you talking about? I'm not creative. I don't do, but I didn't realize I was, just in a different way. So she made me pick something creative like in art. And I was like, I don't do art. Are you kidding me? So kicking and screaming, I finally was like, okay, whatever. I'll just go to one of these wine and paint classes, whatever. Oh my God, with like the big exclamation points. I was hooked. And so I should have had this closer, because I can't quite reach it. But I started one of these wine and paint classes. You know what? Hold on one second. I want to grab this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And eventually after so many years, I've worked up to doing abstract, which is actually really difficult. People think it's hard, but I've hung this. Let me see if I can get it in the frame.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
From like these stupid little bicycle in front of a window with one of these dumb wine and paint, and they're not dumb. They were really fun. So I started with the wine and paint, and then I was hooked, and then I went to more, and then eventually, it got too easy. So then I found an art supply place, and they had classes. But then eventually I was like, okay, so you don't know. Now I'm not going to do that to make money, but it helped really access creativity that I didn't know I had. It helped show me so many lessons, because there were so many lessons that I learned. And get this, they were about fear and comparison and being brave. And it was amazing, all these lessons I started learning when I was going to these art classes. In fact, there were so many, I was like, I gotta take a notebook, because I'm always learning and I'm always jotting something down. So I'm like, oh my God, I gotta jot. And they were crazy. And now they have turned into lessons that I help my audience to learn along the way as well. So even if you're afraid now, you don't have to take that big leap. If I had started with that, I probably would have stopped, because it would have been very defeating. But starting with something simple and fun, whatever that might look like for them, maybe it's trying out a new recipe. I know that sometimes that feels scary because you're just comfortable in where you're at, or maybe it is going to meet up with a new group that you've never met with before or something. But take that brave buddy with you if you have to. The other thing is this, and this is a little tip I learned from acting. Let me back up. Let me preface this. I actually hate fake it till you make it. I hate. I know you're not supposed to hate, but I do hate that term. And here's why: because nobody wants to be a faker. Nobody wants to feel like a faker. We don't want to feel like we're faking anything. But one of the things I learned from acting class was how you get into the mindset of that person, of where you're going, is to get into what that person would be thinking. If you were a brave person, if you were a confident person, if you were doing whatever that thing is you want to do, what would your thoughts be? What would you be thinking? How would you be acting? What would you be doing? Just kind of, I call it an act as if. And the more that you step into that place, it's not faking it, because you're beginning to teach yourself along the way to think like that. And the more you do that, the more you begin to feel that inside, because deep down, you've all had something where you were really afraid, you did it anyway. And then there's this charge and this electrified thing of confidence, and you just want to tap into more of that. And that leads to another one, was to think back to a time that if you're really terrified, think back to a time where you had one of those big wins like that. Get into that same mindset, and then take that first step.
Yes.
So they're just coming off the top of my head right now. It's just boom, boom, boom. But those have all just really helped me over the years.
I love that.
And grace and space is one of the biggest things I would tell you, because you've got to give yourself grace, and you've got to give yourself space to learn and get to know yourself and to grow. And you're an amazing person. So appreciate that. Start with that. That's part of grace, is appreciating all the wonderful things God created in you, because God doesn't create junk. You know that, and I know that.
Exactly. I just love the brave buddy analogy, though. That is so important. So I talk to these membership ladies all the time about, just up-leveling yourself. And the only way that you can do that, for one, is sometimes we have to just knock out the toxic people that we have that sometimes have crept in our lives. Sometimes the naysayers that are like, oh no, there is no way that you can do that. So sometimes we have to be brave to just, you might have to like small size your circle, because it's quality over quantity, right? But that brave buddy is so important in just being able to call somebody up. And if we sometimes go on a self-pity trip, it's having that brave buddy that says, not today. Oh, not
Right.
today, Alice. You are not letting that get over on you today. And you need a brave buddy to tell you that. Not to be your cheerleader, but to just say, not today. Not today. You're not going to feel like
We
that.
all need a kick in the proverbial derriere at times, but we
Right?
need somebody who will do both, who will, because it can't just, I know sometimes I'm a tough talker, but I also love on people, and it's knowing
Yeah.
when to encourage. It's knowing when to inspire. It's knowing when to kick their booty into gear. It's knowing when to grab their hand and take them with you. It's knowing when to do these things, and we all need one. God didn't create us to do this thing alone. Whatever this thing is
Right.
for you, whatever that new thing is, whatever that next season is, we weren't created to do it alone. We were created
Yeah.
to do it, in connection and community and collaboration with one another. And if you
Yeah.
think about Jesus's life, he always had that very close inner circle. Now, granted, somebody didn't have to give him a Jesus moment, but he was that for them, and that was that close inner circle. So we
Yeah.
really have to guard that and protect that like wildfire, because that is one of the greatest joys and blessings and things that will give the juice to life.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I love that so much, Carrie, as you're speaking. It's just, it goes back to making your relationships count, because we cannot be fruitful by ourselves. It's like, first,
Absolutely.
I'm always a firm believer in your relationship has to be with God, but the next, your relationship has to be with yourself.
Without a
And
doubt.
loving yourself, yes, and understanding yourself.
Yeah, years ago I heard a gal, Barbara Sher, who used to say, isolation is a dream killer. And I
Yeah,
think there's just almost no more powerful words when it comes to something around that. Isolation is a dream killer. It will. You can be in business or in philanthropy or whatever it is, by or how I want to say, for yourself, but not by yourself. You're not going
right.
to do everything. I hate the term self-made. Nobody's self-made. Listen,
Exactly.
nobody did it on their own. In fact, if
Right.
nothing else, you did it with God. But
Right.
the truth is, you did it with other people as well, whoever God sent into your life, both the good experiences and the not so good experiences, because we
Right.
need to look at those for the lessons along the way as well. So, yeah.
Yes,
But
exactly.
I thought about the Brave Buddy when I was creating. I was creating one of my programs kind of around this whole thing and what do you do next in your life. And the picture that kept coming into my brain was back when I was a kid and I was really afraid to jump in the deep end of the water, and having somebody else alongside made it. And then eventually you just have to be like, okay, I'm going for it, because at
Yes,
some point you got to take that step off. That's that step out of the boat. But that's what that kept
yes.
coming to me. And somehow God just gave me the word, you need a brave buddy. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly what everybody needs, is a brave buddy. A brave
Yes.
buddy and an honest buddy, like you said, that will tell you the truth.
Yes.
That's the absolute truth. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I have loved this conversation so much, Carrie. Everything like you have said is just like spot on. And so, for one, it starts internally, right? And I talked a little bit about happiness on a previous podcast, but it's like, all of us look sometimes externally for that happiness.
Yes.
You see those fancy cars, those big houses, those fancy clothes that maybe somebody has on. And you think, oh, if I just had that, I'd be happy. But happiness is not externally, right? It all begins right here within ourselves. And that's, when we have that confidence, then it generates that competence, which generates, just being us, confident in ourselves. I think it's that loop that constantly goes back around.
And it's that thing that people keep waiting to be confident until, here's the secret. The super secret is the more that you take the step, the more confident you get. Confidence breeds confidence, and confidence eventually breeds courage. So it needs to start with just a little bit of courage, and then those will start feeding each other, because the confidence comes from the action, from the taking and the doing of things, not just the thinking. You're not going to get it first.
Right.
Sorry to burst that bubble, but you don't always get it first. In fact, most of the time you don't. In fact, God's waiting for you to step out and to trust and to have that faith to take that first step. And then when you do, that's what I'm telling you, the more that you step, the more that you take that action, the next one, the next one, the next one, the more that you're building what I call that mental toughness muscle. You know, a lot of people don't want to talk about being tough, but it's not talk about being tough, being mean. It means being tough, having that exterior, having that grit, that deep down determination. Some people are born with it. Well, you know what? Goody gumdrops for them. For the rest of us, you know what? We got to feed that. And you know, here's the secret of it all is you got to do it daily.
Yes.
Do it daily.
Amen.
You know, daily.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, you got to do it over and over again daily. So,
Yes. Amen, sister.
Yep. Bring it on, baby. Bring it on. So yeah, you know, you see this now, but it, like I said, it's been this crazy journey. What I'm doing today, I could not have done 20 years ago.
Right.
I really don't even think today I could have done it 5 years ago when I was changing into this new thing. And I didn't follow the path. I didn't follow some typical career for 40 years or whatever. I was just so different from the people in my age group. You know, I just sort of made my own path. How? I don't know, by the grace of God, I guess. By the grace. And he gave me a lot of chutzpah and moxie, that's for sure. But the confidence did come later because I was very not confident when I was younger. It was the comparison thing. And it's just, I think I've been doing this now like 25 or 30 years and I've kind of always done it as a kid. I was always fascinated by what makes people do what they do. But then you really start to work on yourself. And I've been working on this thing for probably over 30 years. And so it just builds. Doesn't mean it goes away, as I said, but you get faster and you have strategies in which when those moments come, when you're like, oh my God, like I was just in a barren wasteland last year, trying to figure some things out because I knew some things needed to change long before everybody else pivoted this year. Right. I was already in this pivot. And so, but you learn how to take yourself through those moments and you start to just go back to getting to know yourself. Even if you've done a million personality things or whatever it is, it never hurts to do them again because you get new insights each and every time. And that's really what I did, was go back to two things: my purpose, and then what was the mission God gave me for the business. And I realized neither one of those had changed. It's just I needed to tweak some things along the path for what that was going to look like going forward. So hopefully that will help to help them to really get to just do some exploration. Keep an idea journal right next to you. Everywhere you go, keep an idea journal. You know, and all that crazy junk that's in your brain, start writing it down. Every time you think about it. Because inspiration is for the moment. Sometimes you'll forget it later. So
exactly. It's having that brain dump and having something like, even on my phone, I'll take a notes if I'm out walking the dog and something hits. But I showed him this big long thing of what came out of my brain right after I woke up, because my brain is one of those ADHD things. And then woke up and he's like, oh my God, that's enough for a book. I said, what are you talking about? That's enough to fill the IRS code a whole room. That's crazy. So, but you don't have to do everything, but that's just for an exploration of really getting to know yourself so that you can figure out what that next thing is. And don't wait for the lightning bolt, because it ain't coming. You just need to take that next step, and then the clarity will come as well. I love that so much. Thank you so much, Carrie. That was so enlightening. If people are looking for you, can they find you on Facebook, or where is the best place for them to find Carrie Jeffries?
One of two places, either Facebook or LinkedIn. I do some similar things on them, but definitely different. If they're looking for more of these types of things, that would be what you would find on Facebook, because God has just given me all kinds of things. So I've been, he's been giving all kinds of downloads lately. So there's a lot of it on Facebook, and it's just under my name, Carrie Jeffries. So I'm there. I would love to connect with them. So I invite you. And if you have a specific question, I'm happy to be here for you. You just reach out. God didn't give us gifts to keep to ourselves. The gifts are for sharing. So
right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And everybody, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, hit subscribe. If you have not yet subscribed to our podcast, subscribe to Fulfilled After 50. And we come to you every week with a new episode. So we so appreciate Carrie Jeffries being on today. So everybody go out, have an amazing day today, and say some kind words while you are out and about. Thanks again, Carrie.